And for those who aren't familiar with Hawk Mountain, it's the ancestral lands of the Lenape people. It's in Kempton, Pennsylvania, and it's part of the Blue Mountains, Blue Ridge Mountains over there. And it is a throughway where thousands of hawks migrate annually. And as you can imagine, there are some peaks in on the East Coast, and there was a fairly strenuous hike. Climbing up this hike, I remember I was huffing and puffing and kind of hemming and hawing about like getting up so early, driving 3 hours, and kind of just like laughing with the students and trying to be upbeat, but really this hike was kicking my butt. And I remember stopping to take a breather and to drink some water. And I looked over, and it was like the sun was out, and I looked over, and perched on top of this bush, singing its little heart out, was this like magnificent bird. And it was small, and I just all I could think of was, that's my favorite color. And I didn't know what kind of bird it was, but the sheer blueness of it was incredible. And I just like I can picture it. I close my eyes and I can picture that bird on that bush. And it was this beautiful indigo bunting. And like I said, at the time I was still learning my birds and I didn't know what it was. And so I tried to just memorize the vibrancy of the colors, the beak, the wings. And I just remember being so incredibly joyful. And I, um, and it sparked my curiosity. I wanted to get to know more about this bird. And it sparked my joy in birding in a way that learning the names of the birds and what they where they go and like where that didn't quite do. And so I uh, so I think about those moments, and I think about um, what happens when we come in contact and connect with young people, when we bring our joy and our excitement. And I just remember like grabbing one of the kids and shaking him and being like, "Do you see this?" And him being like, "Yo, chill, Gladys, calm down." Like, and me losing my mind, and just trying to really contain, I couldn't quite contain the joy of watching this beautiful migratory bird just show up randomly. And uh, yeah, so a lot of these stories are these two stories really are about how I got connected on the East Coast to birds. But at some point I made my way to Portland. And I remember living in Portland, trying to get into the environmental field, trying to really get back to teaching uh, kids and to teaching adolescents and young people about the natural world. And I just couldn't get into the field. Despite the 11 years of working for nonprofits and working for as a park ranger, and I couldn't get into the field. I didn't have a degree, and Portland was just so saturated with college educated people that it just made it really hard for me to step into the field. And I remember struggling for community. I was here alone. I had a few friends, but I was really, really missing my community back home. And I managed to step into a happy hour. There was a happy hour happening for the environmental professionals of color. And it was one of their like bigger gatherings because there was free food. And so, retail worker, anytime there's free food, I was there. And we were having we're just chatting about what we do. And I remember there was a guy walking around with a clipboard and a pen. And when he got to me, he handed me the clipboard and said, "Do you like birds?" And I was like, "Actually, I do." And he said, "Do you want to go birding with other people of color?" And I was like, "Shit, yeah, that sounds awesome. I've never done that before. I've like, the demographics of the people that were out going out birding were often white older folks and not very inclusive of someone who looked like me with the amount of energy and excitement and um, rawness to my birding skills. And so he was establishing, so environmental professionals of color at the time was a place for folks of color, indigenous, black, and other folks of people of color to gather, to have happy hour, to talk about being in the field, being in the environmental field, and the challenges that we face being people of color in this field, and just to gather and celebrate and create community. And EPOC is a program of the Center for Diversity in the Environment, and I this gentleman signed me up and actually called me, and there was an email chain, and we went on our first birding trip, and we were called the Feathers of Color. And these are a few photos of Feathers of Colors. Our nickname was the Fockers, which we thought was hilarious. And it was a birding group for folks of color, for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and allies. And so there were also folks, people's partners who were why were also invited, and we did day trips, we did weekend trips, and um, it was the first time that I had ever felt welcome, respected, really to just be myself. As colorful as the birds that we saw were, as colorful as we were, was exactly as colorful as our language was, which was so refreshing to be able to exclaim something that really needed it when we saw a really, really cool bird. But it wasn't only about the birds. It was about us connecting with one another, us sharing story, us talking about other things other than birds. And it was an experience that I had never experienced in any other, community or birding group that I had been to. And I learned a lot doing that. And on the right-hand corner down here is a picture of us on Bonnie Butte, on Mount Hood, doing the West Coast version of the Hawk Watch. And that picture is of me with a bird of prey, an accipiter. I think it's a Cooper's hawk. But it was really, really quite something special, and has been something that I've been missing since we've all been working through this pandemic. And so before I move any further, I just wanna define inclusion, and it's the UC Berkeley Initiative for Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity. This is the definition that I really, really love. And when I talk about inclusive anything, this is what I mean. Inclusion is the act of creating environments in which any individual or group can be and feel welcome, respected, supported, and valued to fully participate. An inclusive and welcoming climate embraces differences and offers respect in words and actions for all people. Now I can't tell you everything. I can't tell you much of what happened in some of those Feathers of Color outings, but I do know that there was great food, there was libations, and there was so much community. There was so much space for being welcome and respected and supported and valued. There was spaces where in the, embracing differences was was expected. And I think that that it was a really beautiful community to cultivate folks who were just learning, folks who had been in the field for forever, and it was really cool to be a part of that. All right, so I hope that there are questions coming in and fantastic, and hopefully at some point, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll try to get through as many questions as possible towards the end. Uh, but I wanted to kind of share the definition of inclusion, and create some space to really articulate some of the things that really require intention. And and I wanted to focus on stories um, that articulated some of these elements, because there are so many stories in my life specific to birding where I did not feel welcome, respected, supported, or valued, or safe. And and sometimes it's still the case. And so community at the center was really an important way to feel all of those things. All right, halfway through. I also want to acknowledge that the description of this talk was very robust, and I hope that this is just the start of a conversation and a planting of a seed. And I hope to continue to have these conversations about how to create inclusive spaces for birding for Indigenous, Black, and people of color, and all the areas of the dimensions that are of diversity that we all carry. All right, so tips for the beginner birder. I I want to acknowledge that there is a culture of of like birding is identifying the bird, either checking a box that you saw the bird or counting them, or there is this like very strong pull to identify the bird. And I think that it's just innate in us to want to have an answer. And as I've grown older, and as I've shifted in my thinking, as I've shifted away from like a colonial colonizer way of thinking about science and education, I've really started to lean into understanding the whole bird, or looking at the whole bird, and so connecting to the spirit of the bird, paying attention to the stillness and cacophony, and then being patient. And so these tips, the tips for beginner bird, these are tips for all birders. Um, I wanted to focus in on a few key pieces around how to identify a bird, but more importantly, how to honor a bird and look at the whole bird in a way that that you can connect to, so that it doesn't feel overwhelming or anxious ridden or stressful. So let's go. Let's start this. So when I talk about looking at the whole bird, what what do I mean? So we start with field marks. there are a lot of different field marks, very specific names, very specific um, uh, biological, and there's like the topography of a bird, and you can find these more specific and detailed field marks in any field guide that you pick up. Usually they have one at the front of the book of the different parts of a bird. But I wanted to start it simple because I think that we can all be birders, even if we don't call ourselves. They're part of our world, and we exist with them, and they exist with us. And so start to ask yourself some questions when you're looking at a bird. And one of the questions that you ask yourself is, what's the overall color? What can I compare that color to? And I think this was really helpful, and I think it helps with how you familiarize anything, right? How you're familiar with the birds that come into your area. What's the overall color? Oh, that bird looks like this red shirt that I have. Whatever helps you remember um, the color of a bird, or make that association is really important. It's about how it helps you. So the other piece is, are there any marks on the face? And that is specific to really, like, what stripes? Does it have stripes? Does it have a mustache? Does it have eyeliner? Is there an eye ring? Sometimes the eyeliner is not. It's like a very messy eyeliner. It's like up above the eye, maybe some eyeshadow. However you want to identify it. These help in answering, in digging in, and really extending that curiosity to just give you a little bit more information. Another field mark that you could kind of look at is what kinds of patterns are on its chest. And I see that often. I ask myself, what kind of t-shirt is it wearing? Because you'll, in field guides, sometimes they'll describe a bird as wearing a shirt or a vest, and I just thought it was helpful for all the birds. What kind of t-shirt is it wearing? Does it have speckles or stripes? Is it slightly yellow? Does it have arrows? Sometimes people call them chevrons. Is there a spot on its chest? Is it yeah? So there's a lot of different ways to start to really understand the bird. And one of those questions is what kinds of patterns is on the chest or are on the chest. So looking at the whole bird is really important. And then and the last that I will share is bare parts. The bare parts. What do its feet look like? What does the beak look like? And oftentimes the feet and the beak help in identifying what kind of things it eats, and what kind of habitat, what kind of environment does it live in, and that's really helpful. And as you progress into your birding, you'll start to ask yourself, like, what kind of color is it? For if you're brave enough to go into the gulls, that's a big question, like what color are its feet. And there's a variety of different field marks, but I think for the beginner birder that is just trying to get their feet wet, um, this is really helpful. What's the overall color? What can I compare it to? Any marks on the face? What kinds of patterns are on the chest? And then what are the bare parts? So this one, connect to the spirit of the bird. And what do I mean by that? Connecting to the spirit of the birds. Birds have a personality. And for a really long time, I was conditioned to think that that wasn't the case, to not anthropomorphize animals or birds. And I think that in Western science, it is often encouraged to think of birds as it and not as beings with spirits. And personalities. And I think that part of understanding a bird and bird behavior and yourself is paying attention to to um to the bird's behavior, but also how paying attention to how they make you feel, because it often connects to what's happening in that area. If you walk into a forest or you walk into a wetland and you're feeling tightness and your shoulders go up, and it's likely because something is occurring in that forest, and you can feel you can feel that and start to put together the story of what's going on in the forest. And sometimes the birds are really, really helpful in that. So paying attention to how they make you feel is pretty great. And and also acknowledging that if you know, in a gray, gloomy day in the Pacific Northwest during the winter time, seeing a bright blue bird is going to be, it's going to make you feel happy. It makes me feel happy, seeing a little color. So acknowledging that. The next piece is use that feeling to connect to the bird, their markings, and their movement. This helps me recall birds. And so one thing that when I was when I was being taught like the traditional way of learning about birds, it was all about like understanding the description in the field guide that sometimes just did not match with like my language and my culture. And so I had to create different ways of connecting to the bird. And one of those was just, making things up on my own and not and leaving the name of the bird aside, but really trying to articulate, what is how does that bird make me feel? Like, oh, that bird makes me really nervous, or that bird, its sound makes me think of a school bus backing up, or that bird kind of is really spazzy. And when I started to connect those uh, those words that connected to me, it helped me recall the birds in a way that field guides just never really did. And then the last piece is, what is their behavior? Where are they hanging out? So, um, are they on the ground? Are they picking around? Are they being sneaky? Are they on a tree? Are they looking up? Are they feeling like, are they bouncing around? Or, are they huddled together? Are they puffed up? Like anything that can help you gather more information will help you kind of sit with it. And then if you're uh, really, really wanting to find the name for it, it allows you to put the names to them. Pay attention to the stillness and the cacophony. So what do I mean by that? um, Practicing wide angle view. And so paying attention to the stillness and the cacophony. So oftentimes we can get really hyper focused on trying to figure out what that bird is, or, there are two birds that look very similar where we have all the field marks and there's something different and we're just hyper focused. But we miss that hawk that just swooped in and just quieted everything down. Or we missed a cat walking through, or we missed a beaver chewing on some shoots of food. And so just practicing all the other things that are happening around you. And I think that that wide angle view was really is more than just seeing, right? It's hearing. It's a variety of different ways to really pay attention to what's happening around you. And then using all your senses, if you have access to them, is critical in paying attention to everything that's happening around you. Another thing that I absolutely love is that when when the area gets quiet, um, there are so many other things. When the area gets quiet and there isn't a whole lot of bird activity, there's so many other things that you have access to, and that allows us to kind of see. And so so I love going out on walks with friends that are plant people, that can speak to the plants in ways that I cannot. There and people and friends who are mushroom people and can find the yummy mushrooms in the forest. And you know, I've got a friend who does it all, who's a great birder, and is knows plants and butterflies and moths, um, and it's just a matter of just paying attention to what's happening, and it might not be the birds, so don't miss it. Yeah, and then paying attention to the stillness and the cacophony in you. And I put this last piece in there because I this year has been a lot, and I wanted to acknowledge that I haven't felt called to birdwatch because I haven't had the emotional energy for it on days, and other days it's all I want to do. And so paying attention to the stillness and the cacophony in your world and your life is really, really critical to to acknowledging what is happening. And then the last piece is be patient. Be patient with yourself, with birds, and with the world around you. And this is a one that I have to remind myself often. If it is your goal to learn as many bird names and birds as possible, that is one way of engaging with birds. There are a multitude of ways to engage with birds, and I encourage you to practice that and be patient with yourself. And also, you know, it takes time to relearn some of the ways that that we've been conditioned to practice, and that's something that I've been really working on, and I'm really focusing on. So, whew, it's about 6:52. I want to pause for some questions. I know that there's yeah, I just want to hear from you all. I would love to see you all, but I would love to hear from you. So Bonnie, I don't know if there are any questions that are coming up, but I'd love to pause right here and take some questions.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. We do have at least one question, but we have some really great comments too that I wanted to share. So Jahela says, yes, I want to bird with other BIPOC people of color. That's awesome. And then Beth says, I am not a BIPOC, but I feel the same way with struggling to get into birding. Birders and culture, it kind of needs to change. Inclusion needs to happen. Beautiful stories. Thank you. And then regarding color, Orietta says lipstick. The answer is always lipstick. She's always comparing color to lipstick. Like he's wearing red lipstick or pink lipstick or what have you. That's funny. That's perfect. And then Jahela wondered, who are the birds on the slide, the whole bird slide that you had? She's wondering who the birds were on that whole bird slide. I think it was one just before that one.
Oh, yeah. Um, I know them, but I'm curious. Uh, I don't want to. So let's ask some questions, right? So who are these birds, and what information can you gather? And so when I've taught birding, and specifically when I've taught young people to bird, you know, as Bonnie mentioned, I worked for a bird organization, and they I was strongly encouraged to make sure that they knew birds, because they would need to use it in their work. And there was such there was some dissonance with that because birding's not for everybody, and so I tried to encourage them to ask a bunch of questions, and so I what I don't remember her name, but I encourage you to kind of to ask yourself some of the questions, and so some of the ways that I would encourage my the young people I worked with was to just get curious, right? There are so many different markings on these birds that will help you kind of dig in a little bit, right? So the way I would do this is, what's the overall color of this bird? It's kind of gray with a light brown belly. Um, there's I could see a pink streak up here. A big indicator is this almost complete eye ring, but not quite. It's like half, right? It's got a short, sharp beak. And if we were in the field, its behavior would tell me everything. This is the spazzy one that's the one that I call spazzy. So this little guy here is anyone?
Nobody yet. Ruby crowned kinglet. Kinglet.
Yeah,
Kinglet.
yeah.
That's what ruby crowned kinglet. That's
Ruby
that's
crown
what we're
kinglet.
hearing.
And so this one's a little harder because it's only part of the bird, and I stretched the picture so it looks way longer and bigger than it is. So I'm gonna hold off on that one. But this one down here, um, something that I didn't talk about in the patterns of the chest is there's like dots, and then there's stripes, and then there's like triangles, like chevrons. Every time somebody said a chevron, I was like, I don't know what a chevron is, but then here I am using it. But just arrows that are pointing up. And so a lot of the way that you can start to learn your birds is by just paying attention to where they're hanging out. And in everyone's neighborhood, I guarantee you there's at least five birds that are always hanging out there. And so I encourage you to start there because it'll help you understand the different types of birds. And then you can start to, like a sparrow or a thrush or a finch, and then start to kind of piece those together. And um, yeah, so the indicators, right? So it's got a you know, fairly triangular beak, but it's about this. It's about the arrows that are kind of working their way up the body, kind of a central little um what is it? Not a spot, but more like they're concentrated on the chest. But yeah, so anyone have an idea of what this little guy is?
A few people are saying fox sparrow.
Yeah.
And then some
Yeah.
people think the one that we were talking about with that we can just see the head and the breast of is someone's guessing a red-breasted nuthatch.
Yeah.
Good job,
And
y'all.
yeah, and so this is like the t-shirt. Like this one's wearing like a crop top. Sorry, I know it's ridiculous, but it helps me. And but it kind of looks like this one, but not quite. And so really just when I was starting out, and I just got overwhelmed with the names, because there's also a culture of like not only knowing the names but knowing the Latin names, the scientific names. And you know, like bird names are hugely problematic, and there's been a lot of energy around renaming birds, and it's only one step of decolonizing the ornithological world. And so I just want to say that right now. There's a history of um, uh, ugh, ugh, and we've got two articles for you all to read, that we'll share out at some point, that really talk about the racist history around bird names, and just the ways in which traditional, like the founding fathers of conservation were really at the forefront um, of doing some pretty egregious stuff to the indigenous people of this land, and it's not often history that we talk about. And there's just a couple of articles that have come out this last year about the naming of birds, or the names of birds, and of we talk about Audubon all the time, of John J. Audubon, and how he desecrated just lots of horrible stuff that but yeah, it is something that is important to acknowledge, to stay curious about, and to really pay attention to when we're not talking about this. And I'm excited that the birding world, I mean, uh, there's a Black Birders Week that happened last year, that's happening again. We had Drew Lantham speak. Drew Lantham did an event similar to this last week, and so there's a lot of work happening to continue to create inclusion within the birding world, and it is very, very challenging.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, Christina says thank you for these articles. I did share those articles out, and I'll make sure that they get included in the follow-up email too. So if you don't get the links, don't worry about it. You'll get them in an email.
Great.
Orietta agrees with you about Audubon. He desecrated the graves of people.
Okay.
Nicole lets us know that Black Birders Week 2021 is May 30th to June 5th. So thanks for that heads up, Nicole. And then let's go back to back up just a little bit. Stacy says starlings feel like stormtroopers to her. And I love that. I love that you're talking about that, like the feel of it, because I feel like that is important. Like with field guides, like I feel like I'm often like trying to like kind of memorize field guides and understand what the field guide says, but I never thought about like just trying to think about like how does the bird make me feel? And I love like that bird's really spazzy. Like that's a way that I can remember a bird a lot more easily. So I love that. So
And it's not, it had never, it didn't make the ripple effect that I wanted to in the mostly older white crowd that I often ended up with when I was, so it was just like, oh, okay, not quite the crowd here, but yeah.
Nahela says that her partner learned to ID nuthatches because they sound like rubber duckies. So that's really memorable.
Fantastic.
Uh, Heather says there's a bird I hear frequently on Cascade Head that she thinks sounds like a British police whistle. She thinks it might be the varied thrush.
Oh, yeah.
Audrey has a question. I'm not sure. Maybe you'll understand this better than I do. What is your connection to the book What the Robin Knows and author? Does that sound, is that familiar to you?
Yeah, yeah. You know, what the robin knows is about bird language, and just how and it has its roots in tracking and co-option of indigenous practices, and it doesn't acknowledge it. And I think that while there are great tips and amazing, uh, like truly amazing ways to connect, um, uh, it's important to acknowledge and when we're co-opting and profiting off of a culture's practice. And I think that you know when I was encouraged to look into it, and I participated in a couple of trainings, and in my gut it felt wrong. Um, I was one of two people of color in the space, and it felt a little like afterwards I felt pretty icky, and I couldn't quite figure out why. And then I talked to my Indigenous friends, and I talked to other people doing the work of equity, diversity, inclusion, decolonization, and justice, and it became clear to me that there were some problematic elements of how it was presented and co-opted. So yeah, that's my feeling.
Great. I really appreciate that. Nicole asks, what's a life lesson you've learned from your birding or nature adventures? And I like,
Mm. Oh gosh, life lesson. Nicole, there's so many. It's like I, I so I read somewhere that like birding is can be like a form of meditation, and coming from a person who struggles with sitting still and like breathing, I found myself just being very still when I was out birding, um, or just being out and like listening to the quiet, listening to the quiet move, listening to the birds kind of do their thing, and just being present, like no binoculars, like no intention of making a list, and just being out there. And I think that that I, that being out in birds has helped me, like when I'm out, when I get out, it helps me calm, like find my calm, and and they've also helped me to remember celebration, because there's something right there's like that chorus, that dawn chorus, where the sun's coming up and they're all celebrating that they made it through the night, and you can feel that, and there's this like amazing celebration that the sun's coming up, and I think that I like that.
yeah, it's beautiful.
Bonnie, you can stop me at any point. However much time you need, because I could keep going. I
Sure.
also forgot how to unshare my screen.
That's
So,
okay.
like,
That's okay.
where?
I like looking at your screens. You have great tips there. You really do. I find them really valuable. And these are really great questions. So I want to keep going with at least a few more, because what I have to share, people can spend time with on their own and don't need to hear a lot from me about. So we're good. Let's see. I have another one. Just kind of just a few comments. I love the idea of connecting to the spirit of the bird. Thank you. I love that too. It's awesome. I needed to hear a lot of this as far as all the various ways of engaging with birds and not just learning all the names. Thank you. All caps. Let's get some questions here. Here's a question. Do you have any recommendations for birding resources to use with 3rd to 5th graders online this spring at a bilingual school? Do you have anything in mind?
Yeah, there's a good a field guide to the birds of North America that is in Spanish. So that's really helpful. But I often think when you're working with 3rd through 5th graders, it's important to find out what they're interested in, because like I said, um, like what they know. If it's a bilingual school and it's also bicultural, it's likely that those kids are bringing some knowledge in that may not be shared by kids that are coming from that traditional birding background. So I think that's a really great place to start. And then there's just just keeping it simple, and you can use any resource out there, but that the field guide Kaufman, I believe, is the gentleman, the person who wrote it, and it's a bilingual, and that's a pretty good one.
Thank you. What advice might you have for those of us who are women of color and in the birding field for a long time, in this case 10 years, this is from Orietta, but are having a hard time carving out safe spaces for Black birders and IPOC birders?
Yeah. I would have some follow-up questions with you, Orietta. I'd be happy to chat offline. And I think that, you know, safety safety is always a concern when you're Indigenous Black person of color, um, birder out there doing your thing. And I was reminded pretty this is the I want to acknowledge that the current um state of our country has reminded us that racism's always existed. It's baked into the foundation of our country, and that what's happened is it's made it okay for people to be incredibly overt about it. And and um there's a handful of instances where I've had people be really rude and dismissive and um, felt unsafe. And there's been times where I've came into a space thinking I was gonna feel all of those things and didn't. And a birding friend of mine really encouraged me to remember that. He's a fellow birder of color, and um, you know, just encouraged me to continue to stay open to places that I had deep biases around it being unsafe for me. And so that's the kind of the challenging piece. But Arietta, I'd love to chat with you more and learn more about what you're thinking about, or what's going on, because I think context is going to be important. But I think co-creating a safe space is going to be critical. Community building is going to be critical in co-creating a safe space. And so if I don't feel safe and comfortable with the people I'm with, then I'm not going to feel safe and comfortable knowing that we're going to be out somewhere and they're not going to have my back. And I think that that's really important.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And yeah, she comments back like, true, thank you. I will connect afterwards. So it sounds like she'll connect with you too.
Awesome.
There are so many wonderful comments here that I'm not able to get through them all. I'm so sorry. I want to take just 1 second to just talk about the Great Backyard Bird Count, and then if we have time for one more question, I'll throw one more out, if that sounds okay, Gladys.
And Bonnie, if you, I'd be happy to answer these questions if you give them to me before you send out what you're going to send out to everybody who participated. Then I'll have those answers for you. So if we don't get to them, I'll definitely answer them, or I'll
Thank
try.
you. That's so kind. Thank you. Awesome. Great. So I can perhaps share out some of these answers later if we don't get to them. So I think there's 2 questions we haven't quite gotten to yet. But I just want to take 1 second and tell you guys about Gladys has given us so much amazing information, and I love her approach. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Great Backyard Bird Count, because I promised I'd say a little bit about it in this event. The Great Backyard Bird Count, if you haven't heard of it, it's a community science project largely sponsored by the Audubon Society and Cornell Labs. And what it is, everyone is invited to watch and count birds for a 4-day period in February. So February 12th through 15th. These observations made during the Great Backyard Bird Count, they help scientists better understand global bird populations and before their annual migrations. Community science projects like this one help scientists understand things such as how the environment and other factors are impacting bird populations. So that's why they can be really helpful. When you're able to participate. Participating is pretty easy. It's fun to do alone. You can also do it with others safely, of course. And it can be done anywhere that you can find birds. You don't necessarily need a yard. You just need anywhere that you can go that you can observe birds safely. you are simply going to watch birds for 15 minutes or more, at least one time over the course of that 4-day period. And then you're going to tell the Audubon Society and Cornell Labs what you see. In order to actually record what you see, you do kind of have to figure out what you're looking at. And so that's, you know, we've kind of heard all the caveats with the difficulties of IDing birds and that kind of thing. And the problems inherent in bird names, etc. So with all that in mind, like this is not necessarily the way that you need to engage with birding, but if you want to, it's a way that you could kind of try to practice IDing birds. And so the cool thing about the Great Backyard Bird Count is they also link to the Merlin Bird app. So if you're new to birding, the Merlin Bird app is kind of a cool thing where you can take photos of birds, listen to bird calls, and then try to ID birds. If you're more of a pro and you're pretty good at IDing birds on your own, you go into eBird and you log sightings that way. I'm going to share these links out to you right now before we sign off for the day, so you can look into this further if you'd like. And if you have any questions at all about it, never hesitate to get in touch with the library, because we are familiar with these and I'm happy to answer your questions about any of these apps. So I just threw a bunch of links into the chat. So a link to the Great Backyard Bird Count, how to participate, a link to info about how to use the Merlin Bird ID app, which is just a kind of a cool app to know about if you've never used it before. I've used it a few times and it can be handy. And then the eBird app if you want to just go straight to eBird and start counting exactly what you've seen. But we're at 7:16 now, so Gladys, you want to come on just one more time just to sign off and say goodbye?
I can try, but I can't figure this out anymore. There is that.
Well, there we go.
All
Yay.
right.
That was wonderful. I learned so much. I am not an experienced birder by any means. I've only just started getting into it, and I love your approach. Like it's really accessible and really relatable. So thank you so much. And I feel like you've given us so much valuable information. This was really truly wonderful. Thank you,
Excellent. Thank
Gladys.
you. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks everyone for staying on and listening. And the Bonnie will share my contact information. So if you have any questions or inquiries, I'm here.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Okay, great. Now, with that being said, I'll go ahead and sign us off.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good
Bye-bye.
night.